The escape pod's hull screamed under the pressure of Earth's atmosphere. Plasma fire streaked around its edges as it plummeted through the night sky, a meteor that no one could ignore. Inside the cramped cockpit, Rilke, a Raldrithian reconnaissance officer, gritted her fanged teeth, her claws gripping the controls. "This is insane," she snarled, her luminescent green eyes narrowing. On her cracked console, the translation device looped the same damning message. "Did you capture human children as prisoners? You are insane, alien," said one of them, in perfect Raldrithian. The recording burned into her mind as much as the flames licked the pod's exterior. The children, a forbidden topic in Raldrithian law, weren't supposed to be here. Yet, against every directive from the Galactic Accord, her squad leader, Commander Vreikel, had taken them. And now, Rilke was branded a traitor for defying him. Her pod struck the Earth with bone-jarring force, the shockwave flattening trees and sending debris into the air. Emergency systems hissed and vented gas, but she wasted no time, punching the release lever. The hatch burst open, and the night air hit her like a slap. Rilke stumbled out, her sleek silver exosuit glowing faintly under the moonlight. She scanned the area, her ears twitching. A forest. Quiet, but not silent. Earth was alive in ways her barren homeworld could never be. But she wasn't here to admire the scenery. The sound of distant footsteps shattered the momentary calm. They were coming. Not humans, her own people. Hunters. She ducked behind a fallen log, activating her biocloak. The suit shimmered, blending her into the surroundings, but her breathing was loud in her ears. She needed to move. The first hunter appeared moments later, its silhouette towering, armored in reflective plates that pulsed with energy. It held a pulse rifle, the barrel scanning the darkness. A second and third followed, their guttural clicks a language of lethal efficiency. Rilke cursed silently. They were closer than she'd anticipated. If they found her, they'd kill her on sight, just another loose end tied up in Vreikel's operation. Miles away, a group of terrified children huddled inside a strange cage of glowing blue energy. The air around them thrummed with alien vibrations. Ellie, a 12-year-old with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, pressed herself against the barrier, testing its limits. She yelped as a mild shock coursed through her hand. "Stop it," whispered Jake, her younger brother, clutching a toy robot. His face was pale, his freckles barely visible under the cold, alien light. "I'm trying to find a way out," Ellie hissed, glaring at him. "Do you want to wait for those things to come back?" Before Jake could respond, the barrier flickered. Both children froze as a shadow loomed over them, a Raldrithian god. Its eyes glowed like twin suns, and its spiked frame filled the room. It grunted something in its alien tongue, then turned to a console on the wall. Ellie seized the moment. She grabbed a metal shard from the ground, likely debris from the crash, and slid it through the cage's base. Sparks flew, and the barrier flickered again. Jake's eyes widened. "Ellie, they'll see you." "I don't care," she snapped. "I'm not sitting here waiting to be dissected." The barrier collapsed with a final, desperate flicker. Ellie grabbed Jake's arm, and they bolted, sprinting past the stunned guard. Alarms erupted, bathing the corridor in red light. The alien roared, but its massive frame was too slow to catch the nimble children. Back in the forest, Rilke heard the alarms echo faintly through her communicator. Her heart sank. The children had escaped the holding cells, but that didn't mean they were safe. Earth's wilderness wasn't forgiving, and the hunters wouldn't hesitate to eliminate any evidence. Rilke tapped a panel on her wrist, bringing up a holographic map. The last known location of the children was marked, a glowing dot amidst the chaos. She had one chance to reach them before the hunters did. Her cloak flickered as she sprinted through the underbrush, her claws silently carving paths through vines. The forest seemed to conspire against her, roots tripping her and branches clawing at her armor. But she pressed on, the children's terrified faces burned into her memory. Rilke didn't care what the others thought. These humans weren't enemies, they were innocents. And she wasn't going to let her people's greed turn them into casualties. Ahead, she heard the telltale hum of a hunter's drone. She dove into the bushes just as the machine zipped past, scanning for heat signatures. Its red light swept over her hiding spot, and she held her breath. The drone paused, then moved on. Rilke exhaled in relief. She needed to be smarter, faster. If the hunters found the children first. A deafening explosion rocked the forest, cutting off her thoughts. The sky lit up as a hunter ship descended, its searchlights piercing the canopy. Ellie and Jake stumbled out of the alien facility, gasping for breath. The jungle greeted them with a cacophony of sounds, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant animal calls. But they didn't stop running. Behind them, the alarms grew louder. Ellie glanced over her shoulder and saw shapes emerging from the facility, more guards, their glowing eyes scanning for them. "Faster, Jake," she yelled, dragging her brother along. "I can't," he cried, tripping on a root. Ellie caught him just as a bolt of plasma seared past them, scorching the ground. The guards were gaining. Ellie pulled Jake behind a thick tree, her chest heaving. "Stay quiet," she whispered, gripping the shard of metal like a weapon. The guards' guttural voices drew closer, their footsteps heavy. Ellie's mind raced. She needed a plan, but what could she do against aliens with guns? Suddenly, one of the guards roared, its voice cutting through the night. Ellie peeked out, and her jaw dropped. An alien figure, smaller, sleeker, was attacking the guards. It moved like a blur, its claws slashing through armor, its energy blasts precise and deadly. Within seconds, the guards were down. The figure turned to Ellie and Jake. "Run," it barked in accented English. Ellie froze. "You're one of them." "No," the figure growled, stepping closer. "I'm trying to save you. Now move before more come." Ellie hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run the other way. But something in the alien's glowing green eyes stopped her. "Ellie," Jake whispered, tugging her arm. She made her decision. "Fine," she said, narrowing her eyes at the alien. "But if you try anything—" "I won't," the alien interrupted. "But they will." A low rumble shook the ground. Ellie turned to see another hunter ship descending, its weapons primed. "Move!" the alien shouted, grabbing both children. Together, they vanished into the jungle, the ship's searchlights slicing through the trees behind them. The jungle closed around them like a living trap, vines brushing against their skin, the ground uneven and treacherous. Rilke led the way, her sharp claws slicing through the dense foliage with practiced precision. Behind her, Ellie and Jake stumbled, trying to keep pace. "Where are you taking us?" Ellie demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. "Somewhere the hunters can't find you," Rilke replied without looking back. Her tone was clipped, urgent. "Keep moving. Why are you helping us?" Ellie pressed. "You're one of them. Why should we trust you?" Rilke stopped abruptly and turned, her glowing green eyes locking with Ellie's. "Because if you don't, you'll die. And I'm not in the habit of letting children get slaughtered." Ellie's gaze faltered, but she didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed Jake's hand and followed Rilke as she resumed cutting through the jungle. Above them, the hunter ship roared, its searchlights scanning the treetops. The rumble of its engines was deafening, and the occasional burst of plasma fire lit up the darkness. Rilke glanced up, her jaw tightening. They were relentless. She activated her communicator, tapping into the hunter frequency. Static crackled before a deep voice growled, "Traitor. Surrender now, Rilke, and your death will be swift." Rilke's lip curled. "Vrykle, you coward. You broke the accord, and now you're hunting children? You'll answer for this." The response was a burst of laughter. "Answer to whom? The humans are pests, nothing more. Surrender, or we'll burn the forest to ashes." The signal cut off, and Rilke smashed the communicator against a tree. There was no reasoning with him. "Who was that?" Ellie asked, watching her warily. "The one responsible for this mess," Rilke muttered. "My squad leader. He's the one who took you." "Why?" Ellie's voice was sharp, accusing. "Why did he take us?" Rilke hesitated. She didn't have the time, or the heart, to explain the Raldrithian hierarchy's obsession with human genetic material. Instead, she said, "It doesn't matter. What matters is getting you out of here alive." Ellie wasn't satisfied, but she didn't push further. They emerged into a clearing moments later, the moonlight casting long shadows on the ground. A faint hum filled the air, and Rilke's eyes darted around, searching for the source. Stay close, she whispered, her voice tense. Too late. The first drone appeared above the treetops, its red eye locking onto them. A warning siren blared, followed by the rapid whir of its weapon system charging. Rilke shoved the children to the ground just as a volley of plasma bolts tore through the air, scorching the ground where they'd stood. She rolled, her arm snapping up to fire her energy weapon. The bolt hit the drone dead center, and it exploded in a shower of sparks. Move, she shouted, pulling Ellie and Jake to their feet. The clearing erupted into chaos. More drones descended, their weapons lighting up the night. Rilke fired back, her shots precise and deadly, but the drones were relentless. Plasma bolts tore through the trees, setting them ablaze. Ellie and Jake scrambled for cover behind a fallen log, their faces pale with fear. What do we do? Jake whimpered. We stay alive, Ellie said, gripping the metal shard tighter. Rilke joined them, her breathing ragged. We can't stay here. The ship will be on us any moment. Ellie peeked over the log and saw the hunter ship descending, its weapons primed. Her stomach twisted. We're trapped. Not yet, Rilke growled. She activated a device on her wrist, and a small hologram appeared, displaying the terrain. There's a cave system nearby. If we can get there. Wait, Ellie interrupted. How do we know you're not leading us into a trap? Rilke's eyes flared with frustration. You don't. But if you want to live, you'll follow me. Ellie hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine. Let's go. The trek to the cave was a harrowing race against time. The drones pursued them relentlessly, their plasma bolts ripping through the jungle. Rilke fought them off as best she could, but her energy weapon was running low on charge. Ellie and Jake clung to each other, ducking and dodging as explosions lit up the night. The jungle seemed alive with fire and fury, every step a struggle to survive. Finally, they reached the mouth of the cave, a dark, jagged opening in the side of a rocky hill. Rilke ushered the children inside, her eyes scanning the sky for more drones. Hurry, she urged. The cave swallowed them in darkness, the sounds of the jungle fading behind them. Rilke activated a light on her wrist, illuminating the rocky walls. Are we safe? Jake asked, his voice trembling. For now, Rilke said. But her tone suggested it wouldn't last. Deep in the cave, Rilke stopped and examined her weapon. The charge was nearly gone, and her wrist device showed her suit's energy reserves were critically low. She cursed under her breath. Ellie watched her warily. What happens if they find us here? Rilke looked up, her expression grim. We fight. And if that fails, we run again. Ellie's jaw tightened. I'm tired of running. Rilke studied her, impressed despite herself. Then you'd better be ready to fight. Before Ellie could respond, the ground shook. A low rumble echoed through the cave, followed by the unmistakable hum of the hunter ship's engines. They're here, Rilke said, her voice barely above a whisper. The cave entrance lit up as a searchlight pierced the darkness. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the air. Rilke, surrender the humans, and I might let you live. Rilke's claws flexed. Stay behind me, she told the children. No, Ellie said, stepping forward. Her voice was firm, her eyes blazing. I'm not hiding anymore. Rilke opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of approaching footsteps silenced her. The hunters were coming. The battle wasn't over, it was just beginning. The cave erupted with light and noise as the hunters entered, their armor gleaming like obsidian in the flickering glow of their plasma rifles. The smallest among them snarled something guttural, and a searchlight flared, locking onto Rilke and the children. Rilke wasted no time. She leaped forward, claws unsheathing as her body moved with lethal precision. The first hunter fired, but she ducked under the blast, her arm snapping up to drive a blade into its chest. Sparks flew as the blade pierced its energy core, and the hunter collapsed with a groan. Run deeper into the cave, she shouted over her shoulder. Ellie and Jake hesitated for a heartbeat before Ellie grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him further into the darkness. The sound of plasma fire echoed behind them, lighting up the walls in bursts of red and blue. Ellie glanced back and saw Rilke locked in combat with two hunters, her movements a blur of strikes and parries. But even as she fought with ferocity, it was clear she was outnumbered and outgunned. We can't just leave her, Ellie said, her voice rising in panic. What can we do? Jake asked, fear etched into his face. Ellie looked around desperately, her mind racing. Her eyes landed on a jagged piece of rock jutting out from the wall. She grabbed it, testing its weight, and turned back toward the battle. You go deeper, she told Jake. Find somewhere to hide. No way. Jake protested, his eyes wide. I'm not leaving you. Just go. Ellie snapped. Jake hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Be careful, he whispered, before disappearing into the shadows. Rilke dodged a swing from the larger hunter, narrowly avoiding its serrated blade. Her own energy blade sputtered weakly, it was on its last reserves. She lashed out, catching the hunter in the leg, but another plasma shot from behind grazed her shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through her body. You can't win, Rilke, growled Vrykle, stepping into view. His armor was bulkier than the others, glowing with a sinister red light. His rifle was leveled directly at her. Surrender now, and I might let you see another sunrise. Like I'd trust you, Rilke spat, clutching her injured shoulder. Vrykle chuckled darkly. You've always been too sentimental. That's your weakness. He glanced toward the shadows where the children had fled. And now it's your undoing. He raised his rifle, but before he could fire, a sharp cry echoed through the cave. Ellie appeared from the darkness, the jagged rock held high. She brought it down with all her strength onto the hunter nearest Rilke. The hunter roared in pain, stumbling back as sparks flew from its damaged helmet. Ellie grabbed Rilke's arm and pulled her back. Thought you might need some help, Ellie said, her voice shaking but defiant. Rilke stared at her in shock. You're either brave or incredibly foolish. Both, Ellie replied, her grip tightening on the rock. Vrykle snarled. You think you can defy me, child? His rifle swung toward Ellie, the barrel glowing ominously. Rilke reacted instinctively. She lunged at Vrykle, her claws slashing at his weapon. The rifle discharged, the bolt striking the cave wall and sending a shower of debris raining down. Run! Rilke shouted at Ellie. But Ellie didn't run. Instead, she darted toward the fallen rifle, scooping it up with a grunt. The weapon was heavy, almost too much for her to carry, but she steadied it, aiming it at Vrykle. Back off, she yelled. Vrykle laughed, his glowing eyes narrowing. You don't even know how to use that. Ellie's finger trembled on the trigger. Wanna bet? Meanwhile, deeper in the cave, Jake stumbled into a large chamber. The walls shimmered faintly with bioluminescent moss, casting an eerie green glow. At the center of the chamber was an alien console, its surface covered in glowing symbols. Jake hesitated, his curiosity momentarily outweighing his fear. He approached the console, his small fingers hovering over the controls. He didn't understand the symbols, but one of them pulsed rhythmically, almost like it was calling to him. He pressed it. The cave trembled, and a deep hum filled the air. The symbols on the console flared brighter, and a holographic map appeared, showing the cave system, and the hunter's ship hovering above it. Jake's eyes widened. I can shut them down, he whispered to himself. He pressed another symbol, and a beam of light shot upward, piercing through the cave's ceiling. The hunter's ship outside shuddered, its lights flickering as its systems scrambled to counter the unexpected interference. Back at the entrance, Vrykle staggered as his suit's systems faltered. What's happening? He growled, his voice laced with panic. Rilke seized the moment. With a roar, she tackled Vrykle, her claws tearing through the weakened joints of his armor. Sparks and fluid sprayed as she ripped his chest plate open. Ellie aimed the rifle, her finger steady now. Get away from her! Vrykle snarled, shoving Rilke off him, but before he could retaliate, Ellie fired. The recoil sent her sprawling, but the bolt struck true, hitting Vrykle square in the chest. He staggered, his glowing eyes dimming, before collapsing with a heavy thud. Rilke crawled to Ellie, her breathing labored. Nice shot. Ellie grinned shakily. Told you I could do it. The remaining hunters hesitated, their leader defeated and their systems malfunctioning. Rilke took the opportunity to grab Ellie and retreat deeper into the cave. They found Jake in the chamber, standing triumphantly next to the alien console. I think I messed up their ship, he said, his voice full of pride. You did more than that, Rilke said, ruffling his hair with a clawed hand. You just bought us a chance to survive. Outside, the hunter's ship lurched as its engines failed, crashing into the jungle with a deafening explosion. The remaining hunters scattered, retreating into the shadows. For the first time since the nightmare began, there was silence. Ellie sank to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. Did we win? For now, Rilke said, her voice soft. But they'll be back. We need to move before reinforcements arrive. Jake looked up at her, his eyes wide. Why are you helping us? Rilke hesitated, then said, because someone has to. And because I couldn't save others before. Not this time. Ellie and Jake exchanged a glance. For the first time, they saw something other than a fearsome alien in Rilke's glowing eyes. They saw an ally. The jungle was eerily quiet as they emerged from the cave, the smoldering wreckage of the hunter's ship visible in the distance. Flames licked at the treetops, casting an ominous orange glow against the night sky. The air smelled of burnt metal and scorched earth. Rilke scanned the horizon, her claws twitching nervously. They'll regroup, she said, her voice grim. Hunters don't give up easily. Ellie stepped forward, clutching the alien rifle she'd managed to keep from the fight. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes burned with determination. Then we don't give them the chance. What's the plan? Rilke glanced at her, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. We disable their comms relay. If they can't call for reinforcements, we might have a shot at escaping this sector. Jake looked up at the towering alien. How do we find the relay? It's on their backup ship, Rilke replied. A smaller craft, hidden nearby. It's standard protocol for a hunter squad. Ellie frowned. How do you know all this? Rilke hesitated, then said, because I used to command squads like this. I know their tactics, their weaknesses. And I know they'll stop at nothing to reclaim what they see as theirs. Jake shivered. You mean us? Rilke nodded grimly. Exactly. The trek through the jungle was relentless. Every step was a gamble, every sound a potential threat. Rilke moved with practiced stealth, her senses on high alert. Ellie and Jake followed closely, their fear muted by sheer adrenaline. The crash site of the backup ship came into view, a sleek, smaller craft nestled between towering trees. It was mostly intact, its hull shimmering faintly under the moonlight. 2 hunters patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and methodical. Only 2 guards. Ellie whispered. That's it. Rilke shook her head. There'll be more inside. These 2 are just bait. They want us to think it's unprotected. Ellie tightened her grip on the rifle. What do we do? Rilke crouched low, her eyes narrowing. I'll handle the guards. You 2 get inside and find the relay. It'll be a central console, glowing red. Shut it down however you can. Wait, Jake whispered, his voice quivering. You're sending us in there alone. You'll be safer inside than out here with the patrols, Rilke said firmly. I'll draw their attention. You just focus on the mission. Ellie put a hand on Jake's shoulder. We can do this, she said, her voice steady. We have to. Jake swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay. Rilke moved like a shadow, her claws silent against the ground. She struck the first guard swiftly, her blade plunging into its neck before it could react. The second guard spun around, its weapon raised, but Rilke was faster. She tackled it to the ground, claws slashing through its armor. The noise drew attention. The ship's hatch hissed open, and 2 more hunters emerged, their rifles blazing. Rilke dove for cover, plasma bolts scorching the ground around her. Go, she shouted to Ellie and Jake. The siblings sprinted toward the open hatch, ducking under the crossfire. Ellie fired a wild shot over her shoulder, the recoil nearly knocking her off her feet. She didn't look back to see if it hit. Inside the ship, the air was cold and sterile, the walls lined with glowing panels and alien machinery. Ellie and Jake crept forward, their footsteps echoing softly. The hum of the ship's systems filled the silence, a constant reminder of the danger surrounding them. There, Ellie whispered, pointing to a console at the center of the room. Its red glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake hesitated. What if we mess it up? What if it makes things worse? Ellie shook her head. We don't have a choice. We shut it down, or we're dead. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. His hands hovered over the controls, his fingers trembling. I think this one deactivates the relay. Before Ellie could respond, the ship shuddered violently. A voice crackled through the speakers, guttural and angry. The hunters knew they were inside. Hurry! Ellie urged. Jake pressed the button, and the console's glow dimmed. The hum of the ship's systems faltered, then died completely. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Ellie grabbed Jake's arm. We need to get out of here. Outside, Rilke was locked in a fierce battle. Her claws flashed in the moonlight, tearing through armor and circuitry. But she was tiring, her movements slowing as the hunters pressed their advantage. Suddenly, the ship's engines sputtered and died, the lights along its hull flickering out. The hunters hesitated, their synchronization disrupted by the loss of their relay. Rilke seized the moment. With a roar, she drove her blade into the nearest hunter, then turned and sprinted toward the hatch. Ellie, Jake, get out now. The siblings appeared at the hatch, their faces pale but determined. Rilke waved them down. Jump! Ellie leaped first, landing awkwardly but unhurt. Jake hesitated at the edge, looking down with wide eyes. I can't. You can. Rilke roared. Trust me. Jake closed his eyes and jumped. Rilke caught him, setting him down before turning back to the ship. The hunters inside were scrambling, their shouts echoing through the night. Rilke slammed her clawed hand against a panel near the hatch, activating the ship's emergency lock. That'll hold them for now, she said, breathing hard. But we need to move. They ran through the jungle, the crash site fading behind them. The loss of the relay had thrown the hunters into disarray, but Rilke knew it wouldn't last. Reinforcements would come, and they'd be more ruthless than ever. Finally, they reached a clearing where a small craft waited, its sleek design distinct from the hunter ships. Rilke ushered the children inside, her movements hurried. This is yours? Ellie asked, glancing around the compact interior. Stolen, Rilke replied. But functional. Strap in. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off, the jungle disappearing below them. Ellie and Jake clung to their seats as the craft shot into the atmosphere, leaving the chaos behind. As the stars surrounded them, Ellie turned to Rilke. Why did you really help us? Rilke's glowing eyes softened. Because you reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. What it means to fight for something worth saving. Jake leaned forward. Are we safe now? Rilke's expression darkened. Safe is a relative term. But for now, you're free. And that's a start. Ellie stared out the viewport at the endless expanse of space. She didn't know where they were going, or what dangers lay ahead. But for the first time since their nightmare began, she felt a spark of hope. We're not prisoners anymore, she whispered. No, Rilke said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You're survivors. And as the ship hurtled into the unknown, Ellie and Jake knew they weren't alone. They had each other, and an unlikely ally who had risked everything to give them a chance.